what a fantastic introduction. And what can I say? Una, the hairs in the back of my neck are standing just listening to that introduction. I know that we're going into our third trip into South Armagh. But I suppose from just a pure, point of view, like a quick synopsis of the two shows, that where we've got to and how we've got there.
Okay. So we started right back in 59 million years ago with the starting off of South Armagh, and we followed it up around the ring of Gullion, and bringing it through the archaeology, the passage graves, the court cairns, the dolmen, best court cairn in Ireland, Ballymcdermott, Clonchagora, up through the Iron Age on the time of the Celts and through the Dorsey. Through the forts on high ground for protection where people were building their homesteads, to the lakes where the crannogs and the souterrains were, that showed the higher classes. One of the best three-ring fort in Ireland, the Sleathram Fort, down beside Cullyhanna. And then the industrial heritage of the Viaduct and the Bestbrook area, the only industrial heritage part of South Armagh. The Chancellor of the Exchequer, Derrymore House, and the straddling of the old Irish Parliament and the Act of Union. And the beautiful village, the unique village of South Armagh, that is Bestbrook, totally unlike anything else within the village areas of South Armagh. And the two heritages of the two groups of people that are living here. And the forming of the lake by the last ice age that covered Ireland, the three lakes, the coming of Camla into Cashel to the Icebowl Lake and to the largest body of water in South Armagh, La Rosse, 222 acres. And then we finished last week doing the unique history that is Creggan Graveyard, and I suppose my very special place in South Armagh, I would rate as Creggan Graveyard.
Una, before you started into it, Barra was trying to tell us about townlands, and then we sort of thought that maybe it's a better option for the real historian to talk about the townlands.
Oh, don't be knocking poor Barra. No, townlands I think we will do as an evening on its own, because it's a really, really important one, and we'll look at the whole townland structure, not only of Ireland, but particularly of South Armagh.
Well, we'll be looking forward to that. And of course, Una, before we start, I have to say again, the response that we have been getting from the last two shows have been phenomenal. There's people been talking about it everywhere I go. There's how does that woman know all this stuff? How does she keep it in her head? I says because she's really good at what she knows and it's passionate with her. So Una, I'm looking forward now from the trip right round from Creggan round to round the other side of the mountain and back to Camla. But before you start all that, I just want to ask you a question about the chap that's buried in Ballymar graveyard. That every time the locals would go past, they would throw a stone onto his grave. Do you know who I'm talking about?
Yeah, that's Florence McMyer. That's the man who paid the passage to England to give evidence against Oliver Plunkett. Two sides to that story. The only side we get is Oliver Plunkett's side. I would intend to give you McMyer's side.
Well, we'll keep that for another night.
That's another night.
I was asked to ask you that one to see what you would say. So, Una Walsh, I'm going to sit back and I'm going to enjoy another trip round the other side of South Armagh, the other side of Sleepgullion Mountain, and then I'm going to come in and ask you a few questions, and I'm going to ask you a couple of questions about the tourism of South Armagh and people coming into this area to see, because I have been sort of watching people putting pictures up all weekend about going to Kerry and Galway and all around Ireland, and what we have here in our doorstep just matches anything like that. And I want to get your thoughts on that, but we'll keep that for maybe a half an hour. So Una, let's continue the tour of South Armagh.
Now, I opened with, that is the Traditional Arts Partnership. And I opened with that because of a couple of conversations I've had this week. One of them being somebody saying to me, you know, you're going on DestinationNewry and you're giving away all your information. First of all, if you give information, you don't give it away. South Armagh doesn't belong to me. South Armagh was here when I came, and South Armagh will be here when I go. And really, information is for giving to other people, is how I've always viewed it. And the other question somebody said was, how do you know things will ever be any way going forward when there are no longer your age group of people there? And that's the absolute answer, what you've just watched. The Traditional Arts Partnership, that's the 15 to 18-year-old group playing. Absolutely and totally extraordinary. The talent that's in South Armagh, the Celtic culture that's coming straight from the Roche that we showed on the very first night. The music, the song, they are just playing it with absolute and total pride. And I am the proudest woman in South Armagh to say that I am presently president of the Traditional Arts Partnership. So the future of South Armagh and its culture is just absolutely at its height. So we're starting off tonight. This is Glassdrumman Church. So Glassdrumman Church, we've left the Cregan Road and we've come up as far as Glassdrumman. This church was opened in 1932. It's an absolutely splendid cathedral type church in a fairly remote part of South Armagh. So it opening in 1932 in the depths of depression, to be able to put a church like that, I think signified for the people the pride that they had in being able to do it. But it has a unique story because it's the rebuilding of an earlier building. This is part of Ravensdale Castle. If you just type in your Google search Ravensdale Park, you'll find a picture of the old Ravensdale Park owned by the Fortescue family. It was burned in the Civil War of 1922, and the stones were in the hands of the Land Commission in the south of Ireland. And when Canon Sheeran was going to build a church here at Glassdrumman, he had found out about the stones. He purchased them, brought them back here, and when the architect realised the value of what he had, he recreated a section of Ravensdale Castle, complete with bell tower. Now, if you Google it and you look at the old picture, you can see Glassdrumman Church sit completely inside it. Aberdeen granite columns inside, Italian marble. The Italian men came and did the altar area in it. But there's another piece to that story, in that the Fortescue family were not regarded as a good landlord family. They wouldn't allow, from either tradition, servants to go to service or church on a Sunday morning. And the old story went that there was a curse in 3 parts put on them. One being that the name would die out, which did happen. The second being that a songboard would never sing over the estate. And the third being that mass would be said in their house. And in 1932, an architect who knew absolutely nothing about the previous story or history of the stones recreated part of Ravensdale Castle as a church. This is my home church. This is where I was baptised, confirmation, communion, and married. So Glassdrumman Church. Okay, Cathal. And this is the lake just further on up the road, heading towards the hamlet of Ball's Mill, called after Thomas Ball, the beneficiary of the O'Neill land, and tied back to this, because this is where the O'Neills built their church at Glassdrumman, or at Cregan, but built their castle here at Glassdrumman on the high ground to the right-hand side of this lake. And the reason they came from Cregan to here to build their castle was that as the crow flies, they directly faced Roche Castle, the last and greatest, most strategically placed castle of the Normans, just inside County Louth. So they watched the Normans for no incursions, and the Normans watched them. The absolute borderland area between the two parts, between the Gaelic province of Ulster, ruled by the Irish chieftains, and the edge of the Pale that came as far as County Louth. Now, small crannog on this lake as well. And when the O'Neills lost their land, the O'Neill Castle was here, as I said, high on the right-hand side of the rock. At the time of the plantation of Ulster, the Gaelic chieftains, the O'Neill part of the chieftains, still here in Glassdrumman, and they didn't lose their land until the Cromwellian confiscation. And then they were sent to Connaught. Some of them took their quarter acreages in Connaught. They did what was quite common for the Gaelic chieftains at that time. They partially burned their castle before they left to stop it being taken over by the Crown forces. The last of the castle was knocked. Some of it used to build the old church, the previous church to the one I'm just after showing you at Glassdrumman. Some of it used for road fill. So there is no longer anything there of Glassdrumman Castle. Now, when I was a child, my father and grandfather could point out a piece of rock just at the very edge of the high ground. That was one of the foundation stones, but that's no longer there. So the O'Neill Castle itself is gone. Just to the right-hand side as well, behind where the castle was, if you come here, and really this is something you need to do, because it's very well to take you around on a virtual tour. There is nothing beats standing on the ground when people are talking about this and looking around you and seeing the scenery, seeing the area, getting a feel for where the people were. But just to the side of it is an outhouse. It was Jerry Devlin's outhouse when we were children. But actually its history is that it's the old Glassdrumman police barracks, taking it back to the 1800s. Now, it was part of a famous story in this area, in the South Armagh area, known as the Crossmaglen Conspiracy. And the Crossmaglen Conspiracy was a set-up to break the power of the Land League. Very strong area throughout the Land League. And it was a conspiracy to destroy the Land League, set up partially by the McGeown family at Silverbridge and Silverbridge Constabulary. And Glassdrumman Constabulary stood out against it and weren't willing to be part of the whole conspiracy. 12 men jailed for their part in it, and mistakenly jailed. The youngest of them, Michael Waters from Cullaville, and he died in a flooded cell in Mountjoy Jail. Many more men left the area for fear of conviction. So it was a big story in this area. It was spoken about by Charles Stewart Parnell and the Irish Party in the House of Commons in January of 1885, in terms of, had it happened, had that conspiracy been planted and worked anywhere else in the world, it would have led to conviction for the people who were responsible for it, not for the men who were wrongly convicted. Okay, Cathal. Now, Castle Roche. This is the edge of the Pale. This is the Norman castle. Now, if you were here and inside this castle, you would see why strategically the Normans built their castle here. The Normans, first of all, Strongbow came into Ireland in 1169, in at Wexford and up the east coast of Ireland. The idea being that they would move right across, but really they were confined to the area that became known as the Pale. So from Wexford right up the east coast of Ireland, as far as here, this was the last of their land jurisdiction. Anywhere else that there were Normans, they've travelled by boat. They've travelled from Carlingford up to County Down and County Antrim, where there was another Norman stronghold, but not across the Gaelic middle part of Ulster. So Roche Castle built by Rhodesia de Verdon. The de Verdons were an influential Welsh family. Most of the men who came in with Strongbow were from Wales. It's where the name Una Walsh, the Walsh name, that's part of its history, because the Walsh name was simply men of Wales. They were the people who came in with Strongbow. But the Verdens were an influential family. The town of Drogheda. Drogheda is a walled city, a walled town, partially in County Meath, partially in County Louth, and the County Louth part of Drogheda ruled by the de Verdon family. Her grandfather, Bertram de Verdon, was the man who came in with Strongbow, and that Castletown part of Dundalk, Castletown Mott and Bailey, built by Bertram de Verdon, her grandfather. But she built this castle in 1236. So from 1169 they had come in, and by 1236 she was building Roche Castle. The story that goes along with it is that she had looked for an architect to help her to design and build this castle, and she hadn't been successful in getting anyone. And she then promised her hand in marriage to the architect who would come and do it. And the architect came. She wanted secret passages built into it. The architect came, the castle was built, and it's a spectacular castle and very cleverly designed. This is high ground, and it's a triangular shaped rock. The castle is a triangular shaped castle that completely sits on the rock that's underneath it. It's designed to sit into the rock. But the night of the marriage, she had him turfed out the upstairs window. So there is a window in Roche Castle that down through the generations was always known as the murder window, because the architect had come to his demise at Castle Roche. Now, it was, as I say, strategically very important. If you stand inside that castle up on the parapets, you can see straight to Dublin. There's a 360-degree panoramic view from Roche. If you just go into the next slide, Cathal, it's showing it from a different side, and you can see more of where it's shaped into the rock. But you can see completely in all directions. You just couldn't believe how far you can view from it. And if you were inside it, you could see why they would have chosen here to build. But this is about 1.5 miles if you're traveling by road from Glassdrumman, but it's about 1/4 of a mile as the crow flies. So you can see why the O'Neills then came just to the edge of the border to face into Roche Castle. This is just the same as the scheduled monuments in this part of South Armagh. This is a registered monument in the south of Ireland. It's in the hands of OPW, the Office of Public Works. It's on Quigley's farm. They are very accommodating for people coming to see it. The only requirement is it is a working farm, and if you're going into it, then gates need to be closed, and you need to be aware that if there are animals in the field, that you have to be extremely careful. But Roche Castle is absolutely spectacular. The de Verdons, as a family, are still part of that family, are still in North Wales. And wouldn't it be lovely that you could maybe at some stage, 1236, could you get somebody back that we do something here for a commemorative event at Roche Castle? All right, Cathal.
Urna Cain na Cainche, the green hill of Cain, son of Cainche. Flower of maidens of fairest face, famed for human splendour. Head of curls, beloved of poets, enhances warmth and welcome. Face as the sun needs bright new dawn, banishes grief with laughter. It is my sad woe, love, that we're not alone in that fort of Cain, son of Cainche. My gentle sweet girl, it is better you'd fare to spend your young life with me there. than sad in a corner with a miserly bore at your spinning wheel and carder. You'll have sweet music played on harp strings to awake you, and love poems thereafter. There's no forth on earth as airy and bright as the hill of Cain, son of Concha. Charming sweet lass of the pearl-coloured tresses, come out later on in the night, when the people and clergy are deep in slumber, asleep beneath linens white. Far north we will be, away from them all, at the break of tomorrow's new dawn, together and fearless in sweet isolation, in that cave of Cain, son of Concha.
You're in Orney Graveyard at the stone of Pedro Durnan. You've just heard my nephew E play, and he played Una Walsh, and I did the poem itself in English because it's such a beautiful love poem. O'Durnan was one of the Gaelic poets who rode with the Rapparees with Seamus Moore McMurphy, buried, the only one of the Gaelic poets buried outside of Cregan. And he was buried in 1769, so his bicentenary was in 1969, and that's when this stone was erected. Is Damien?
Yeah, just to talk about Orney Graveyard, I have been in it so many times over the years. I would have walked down from Forkhill down Orney Lonan, if you know where that is,
yeah,
and crossed it right down to it, because believe it or not, my grandmother from Forkhill, who was Maggie Meany, she had children buried in that graveyard. They maybe were stillborn or something, or they died very, very young, but they were buried in Orney Graveyard way back in the probably early 30s or late 20s. And I always loved going down to Orney Graveyard. You know, it's a very peaceful place, you know, and it's just on the edge of South Armagh, and there is a great history to it, and it's very easy got to. And again, it's one of these places that's probably off the beaten track, and not a lot of people would know about it, but it's an absolute lovely place to go to. So I love the little bit of music there and the poem, and I was just thinking of my granny there as you were saying that. So a lovely memory.
Yeah, Orney means prayer. There are a couple of townlands throughout Ireland using the word Orney, but for here, it's just a church. Very ancient church. It's reputedly from the time of Patrick. And that it was a patrician church, and certainly during the time of the penal times, this graveyard, and it's small, Damien, you've been in it, you know that. It's just inside County Louth, but if you're leaving the village of Forkhill, you're walking the mass pad, the way that people would have traditionally went from Forkhill out to it. It's the church itself, the small church that's in it was literally, I think, about 28 by 16 feet. So very small, but definitely at the time of the mass rocks, when churches weren't being used, there is a local tradition that says mass was still said in Orney Graveyard, in the church in Orney Graveyard, and that people used it quite a lot. As I say, O'Durnan, the music you heard and the song you heard was Una Walsh or Killing Hill. Killing Hill had a cromlech, a passage grave on it. Killing Hill is about 2 miles heading towards Dundalk from where Orney is. And Cain, son of Concha, is the name of the poem. But Cain, then father of Lugh, the sun god Lugh, and Lugh gave his name to County Louth. And Lugh, in turn, son of Cuchulainn. Cuchulainn was son of the sun god Lugh, and his mother was Dacra, sister of Conor MacNessa, and that's where we get the story of him coming from Waha to Cullen's Forge at the side of Slievegullin. So this is the thing about it. It's a continuous story. It just moves through the generations, and you just need those bits that tie it up together. The other, I suppose, song that is now very popular, belonging to O'Durnan, is Manana Hearn, Women of Ireland, which has been used very much now with a group of women singers who are promoting it. And Manana Hearn was set to music by Sean O'Reilly of Cultus Cultori Erin, and sang for the first time by Sean O'Shea, a very good traditional Irish singer, in the National Concert Hall in Dublin in 1969 for the bicentenary of O'Durnan. The other grave, and it's like Cregan. You turn a sod here and you turn up bones, because it has been massively buried. But the other grave in it, that's an important grave historically, is the grave of Thomas Lappin. And Lappin was the United Irishman from the Mullaban Forkhill area, was the pipe maker in the Craigdhu, and sworn in at the Market Stone in Mullaban by Jemmy Hope, the weaver from County Antrim, and scourged to death beside Belmont Barracks in Mullaban, and taken, and we few comrades gathered round and buried him in Orney graveyard. So Orney, a beautiful place to go and visit as well.
Una, graveyards are a very, very important part of South Armagh, right across. And we have somebody asking about Cleavey churches, but we'll get to there when we get right round the mountain. We're not there yet.
We're on our way.
And again, another lovely church here in Forkhill. I've been in it time and time again, and the little forest beside it for many, many years. So there's somebody that actually lives in this house. Isn't this the Church of Ireland?
This is the Church of Ireland. This is the church built. Forkhill was a landlord village. Forkhill was created by Richard Jackson. The Jackson family, coming from County Derry, owned substantial lands in Cavan and substantial lands in Dublin. But coming into the Forkhill area, and the man who came was Richard Jackson. He built the Church of Ireland here in Forkhill. He brought with him a group of settlers, and he set up the village of Forkhill. Now, if you go to the next slide, Cal, it's also the church, but you'll see that it's spelled Forkhill, which is part of the story of the Anglicizing of the names, because the original Irish name is Forkhill, which means a hollow or a trough. But when it was being Anglicized, they put a H into it. If you look at the signpost at Kilcurry, you'll see that it's spelled properly at Kilcurry without the H, because it shouldn't have a H. But this is what happened in the Anglicizing of names. Now, Forkhill is not a townland. Forkhill is purely that village. This is the townland of Sheehan. But I don't want to do too much about townlands because we're coming back to them. So this church built by Richard Jackson, and Jackson died in 1776. He had no family. His house was down in an area that's known as the Sweep. It's the field just across from Larkin's pub. And that house only went in modern times. He was a very wealthy man. And as I say, had no family. And when he died, it took an act of government, of Parliament, to administer his will. And to do that, they set up an organisation that was known as the Jackson Trust. And the Jackson Trust met 4 times a year. It was made up of the landlord families of that Forkhill, Drummond area, and the rectors of the Church of Ireland. It met 4 times a year, and from 1795, it has met continuously to the present day. Now that's some record. And it still administers money from the Jackson estate. But the thing that Richard Jackson left, and I mean, there's all sorts of stories of how landlords are viewed or not viewed. Jackson was viewed fairly well. And we're going to hear a song in a couple of minutes, The Boys of Mullaban, which praises Jackson. But the one thing that he has left a priceless, absolutely priceless legacy to this parish of Forkhill, because the first census of Ireland was taken up in 1821, and it was subsequently taken up every 10 years, just as it is now. All of the census material was stored in the forecourts in Dublin. The very early part of it, it was pulped, but the rest stored in the forecourts in Dublin, burned in the Civil War. So Ireland has very little census material until the 1901 census, which is now online. Again, the importance of townlands, because that's how you access it. But in Richard Jackson's papers, there is a complete 1821 census for 21 townlands of the civil parish of Forkhill. Nowhere else. I mean, there are fragments of it in different parts over Ireland, but that's absolutely and totally unique. So the landlord's legacy to this area is a document that can bring families back into the 1700s. Absolutely priceless. Can we play the song, Cal?
One Monday morning early, as my rambling steps did lead me down by a farmer's station, through meadows and green lawns, I heard a great lamentation that the wee birds they were making, saying, we'll have no more engagement with the boys of Mullaban. Squire Jackson, he's unequalled for honour and for reason. He never yet turned traitor or betrayed the rights of man. But now we are in danger from a vile, deceiving stranger who has ordered transportation for the boys of Mullaban. I beg your pardon, lady, in the asking of this favour. I hope it is not treason what I am going to say. I'm condoling late and early, my very heart is breaking for a noble squire's lady, and she comes from near Finney. Oh, I've heard with great emotion as our heroes crossed the ocean, the world in wild commotion, the very sea ran dry. The trout and salmon gaping, and the cuckoo left her station, singing fare thee well, Killeavy, and the boys of Mullaban. Now to end this lamentation, my mind's in consternation for want of education. I now must end my song, for without hesitation we are charged with combination. and are sent for transportation from the hills of Mullaban.
Una,
So that was
again. Yeah, again, I've heard that before, but I just sat back and closed my eyes there, and it was just class. I have a very soft spot, not for Mullaban, mind you, but for Forkhill, because that's where my mother's from. And as you say, at Jackson's Folly, I spent lots of summers in and around that place there and climbing up it and down at the wee lake as well. So maybe a little bit of history about Jackson's Folly.
Yeah, and first of all, that was John Campbell, who would have been, I suppose, better known and world known as a storyteller, but an absolutely beautiful singer, I think. There was a wee bit of doubt about that song in its praise of Squire Jackson, because it was written after he died, and there was a bit of money about, so there was a wee bit of a doubt as to how 100% credible it was. This is Jackson's Folly. And this was a picnic site, a site where Jackson and the other landlords would have come to sit and hunt the deer that were coming off the mountain, and the ladies would picnic, the ladies of the squires would picnic around the area, the lake behind it, where they could fish. Again, if you're inside the Folly, as you have been, the view down the valley. Now, I know you talked before we started about the Ring of Kerry and places. I think one of the most beautiful roads in Ireland is the road from Forkhill coming down to Mullaban. Now, it's like every road. It's better coming from Forkhill down to Mullaban than going the other way. The entire valley opens out in front of you as you're coming down that road, and it is absolutely spectacular, the view coming down from it. And you get all of that from inside the Folly. You can see, now, the Folly, it wouldn't have been chosen. It would have already been a site for the medieval beacon towers on top of that hill. And there were beacon towers right around the different area. So that was why. But right beside it as well, to the left-hand side of the Folly, there is a big stone. Now, the Clockmore Stone at Rostrevor, and the wonderful story of the giants throwing the stones at each other. The Clockmore Stone is a Scottish stone. It's a glacial erratic, known as a glacial erratic, carried with the ice. As the ice was moving, it dug it up, carried it with it. When it couldn't hold it any longer, it dropped it. And one exactly the same, just to the left-hand side of that Folly in McArdle's Field. And we've had it carbon tested, and it's also a Scottish stone. But look at the view. Look at the view where you're looking back, even from where you are looking back over at that. It's spectacular. Okay, Cathal. So we've moved now. We've gone right through the Drummondtee area, and the Drummondtee area is so significant with Michael J. Murphy, but I'd like to do Michael J. Murphy a night as part of stories, because it's too important just to gloss over it coming to here. This is Kilnasaggart. This is also a scheduled monument. So you'll find this if you take the road from the Three Steps and you're heading towards Jonesborough, the village of Jonesborough. You take a right-hand turn in, and it'll take you over to Kilnasaggart Stone and to Myra Castle. So that's the area we're in. We're on the far side of Slivgullion, and always a great bit of jibing between Drummondtee and Mullaban. Mullaban said they have the front of the mountain and Drummondtee have the back. Drummondtee said they have the front of the mountain and Mullaban has the back. So a shared mountain. But Kilnasaggart, the church, the priest, the field of the church. And this was a church site. Now this, if you go to the next slide, Cathal, I think it goes in further onto the stone. Yeah, this is dated as the earliest Christian standing stone in Ireland. And it's been dated because there's an inscription on it, and the inscription reads, "From Tirnock to Peter the Apostle. And Tiernach's death is recorded in the annals of the Four Masters as 714 AD. So because of that, they have dated this to 700 AD, which is dating it as the earliest Christian standing stone in Ireland. There are 13 crosses on it, mostly surrounded by circles, 10 on one side, 3 on the other. There is a marking at the bottom of it that had been put forward as Ogham writing, but that's not definite. It seems maybe that it's knife cuts that are on it. And this entire area, it's in an enclosure, which is fenced around. And that entire area had been a church area. It was excavated as well as the archaeology sites in 1960. And it showed both stone-built and dug-built graves in it. Now, it has another history when we go to Myra Castle that I'll tell you about, but it is in the third field. The number of people who have come as far as where the signpost is, because it has a signpost, and as a scheduled monument, it has public access. But the number of people who've come back to me and said the stone's gone, it's not gone. You have to go to the third field. You have to go completely through 2 fields and into the third field to find it. But that's Kilnasaggart standing stone. Okay, Cathal. Now, this is the one that was the game changer. This is Myra Castle. The history of here is absolutely enormous. You're on the Gap of the North from your leaving Fahard Old Graveyard. You're on the Gap of the North. You're also on the routeway through Kilnasaggart of the Slimalukra. The Slimalukra is one of the Tara was the seat of the High Kings. 5 grave roads left Tara. One of them came north. And when it came into County Louth, it divided again. The Slimalukra part came through the Gap of the North and straight to Dunseverick in County Antrim. The other part came through the Fuse, the Ballymorna Feda, the Great Road of the Fuse, down through Dorsey, through Carrigawaddy, out the back of Newton Hamilton, and directly down to Ardmagh, to Maha's Hill in Armagh. But Myra Castle was the changing of the history that had gone before, because we've talked about the O'Neills, excuse me, we've talked about Ulster being the most Gaelic of the provinces of Ireland, with Q O'Neill and Q O'Neill's security in the middle of that Gaelic province. Every time that Q O'Neill left Ulster, he garrisoned men on the ground to hold the Gap of the North. The natural barrier coming into South Armagh was the Ring of Hills. They created its own environmental barrier. The only weak spot in that land entry was the Gap of the North, was that passageway that was running directly through at the Gap of the North. And he left men to defend it. He went to Kinsale, which was probably his biggest mistake, and he was heavily defeated at the Battle of Kinsale. He'd walked men the whole length of Ireland from Ulster to Kinsale, heavily defeated because the Spanish didn't arrive in time. The Spanish didn't come in time for Kinsale. The French didn't come in time for Killala. If all of the people who should have turned up had turned up at the right time, we would have been writing a different history. But he was defeated at the Battle of Kinsale and he withdrew. For the first time ever, as he withdrew, he didn't defend the Gap of the North. And in 1601, Lord Mountjoy, who was Viceroy to Ireland, followed. And in 10 days, he built Myra Castle. Now, Myra Castle is absolutely nothing like Roche Castle. It's not an expensive living castle. This is a keep purely to put a built castle belonging to the English on top of the Gap of the North to show that Q O'Neill was on the back foot. He built Myra Castle in that amount of time because he took the stones of the old monastery at Kilnasaggart, which is only 2 fields down below it, which we're after seeing, took them and built the castle. He garrisoned it, Mountjoy, with 12 men. Now, Q O'Neill had already parleyed. If you ask the Drummondtee people about the Dacklemore is a mountain just at the edge of Drummondtee. Hugh O'Neill had already parleyed with the previous Viceroy to Ireland, who was Lord Essex. Essex was the tie boy of Queen Elizabeth. Now, I didn't make that up. That's complete and absolute 100% truth. But he had parleyed with Hugh O'Neill and drawn up a treaty. And he went post-haste back to Elizabeth with the very good news of this treaty that he had drawn up with Hugh O'Neill, and Hugh O'Neill was an extremely intelligent, bright man. It seems quite obvious from all of the things that he had done. But he arrived into Queen Elizabeth's bedchamber. Elizabeth was totally bald because at that time of the stuff that they used to do their hair. She had lost her hair. He arrived unannounced into her bedchamber, and she was quite annoyed with him for that. And she was even more annoyed when he gave her the terms of the treaty that Hugh O'Neill had persuaded him to sign. And she said she could have lost Ireland without him. So Essex was very soon in the Tower of London, and the new Viceroy was Lord Mountjoy. But Mountjoy garrisoned 12 men here in Myra Castle, and he followed Hugh O'Neill on into the heartland of Ulster. The next place he stopped that you can track him is the village that's now known as Mount Norris. Mount because of Mount, the Mount part of Mountjoy, and Norris because Norris was one of his captains. That's why that's called Mount Norris. The old people here in South Armagh never called Mount Norris Mount Norris. It was always known as Port, because that was the old Irish name of it. So 1601, Lord Mountjoy, at the top of the Gap of the North, built Myra Castle. 1603, 10 days before she died, and the modern thinking is that Elizabeth was already dead and the news was held back in London. 10 days, we'll say, before she died, Hugh O'Neill surrendered to Queen Elizabeth. Now, Elizabeth pardoned him. Hugh O'Neill was a favourite of Elizabeth. He had been reared at the court of England, but she pardoned him. But O'Neill knew that his power had gone, that he was in trouble. And 1607, Hugh O'Neill led the chieftains from Lochswilly in the Flight of the Earls, and 1609 was the plantation of Ulster.
Well, when you talk about Myra Castle and it being built in 10 days and Queen Elizabeth and Essex, but sure, did he not fight with O'Neill, and O'Neill was beating him all over the place? And then I did know that he was a favourite of Elizabeth I, and obviously when he went into her bedchamber, and you wouldn't hardly believe that we could get Elizabeth I talk about her bedchamber in the history of South Armagh. But obviously with Myra Castle, that is very significant. And when he seen that she'd no hair, then she decided she would probably get rid of him, and probably that's what she did. A wee bit like the woman that threw the husband out the window on the wedding night. And the things you learn about South Armagh, and I believe, Una, the pub in Mount Norris is called the Port, if I'm not mistaken.
Yeah. And that's why that was the old Irish name. But the significant thing is here that those 8 years were the changing of the province of Ulster. And that's a direct line. 1601, the castle built. 1603, O'Neill surrendered. 1607, the Flight of the Earls. 1609, the plantation of Ulster. And that was the whole landscape completely changed from your Gaelic province. Now, I've been in the Guildhall in Derry when they do the whole story of the siege of Derry. This is of the same importance. You know, it's absolutely of the same importance.
But when we hear these stories, I would say to you that probably not a lot of people would probably know that. And I'm going to lead my question on to you now about the tourism and bringing people into this area. And yes, you did talk about driving down from Fort Kildemulliban. It's absolutely spectacular. And a sunny day, it's one of the nicest views you will ever see down that valley. Yeah. And obviously from the folly, you can see that. But the question is, in relation to tourism, and in relation to bringing people into our area to tell them all these great stories and tell them about the massive history, because I mean the history that's underneath here is, I would say, spectacular compared to other counties in Ireland. I'm trying to figure in my head here, is there any other part of a county in Ireland that would have as much history from the foundation of the county, or going right back into the midst of time and coming up to now, to this part of South Armagh? And I'm finding it very hard, and I'm racking my head here trying to find out, is there any other county with as much history and so much change over the years to South Armagh? And I can't come up with an answer to that.
But you see, some of it is where this is placed, where South Armagh is placed, because the borderland makes the history. I mean, this every army that moved across, I mean, with the 13th of July, the Battle of the Boyne, William's army came through the Slieve Malucra, directly coming from Antrim. They stopped outside Lough Bricklin, and General Schomburg came as the scout through the Gap of the North and straight out above Dundalk. James's army left Derry and came up the Ballymorna Feda. There's a place in Dorset that's still known as the King's Seat, where King James is supposed to have sat. He came up through the Ballymorna Feda and directly headed to the Boyne. The two armies marched through South Armagh to fight a European war at the Battle of the Boyne. You know, and this is the thing, all the movement came through this borderland. So the amount of story and history that's here is absolutely outstanding.
Yeah, but again, you know, I would emphasize the point here. And, you know, obviously, and I know you said at the start, people were saying you're giving away information, but information is gold. And it's brilliant to be able to put that out.
But I don't lose anything by giving information. You know, that's what information is for. It's for people knowing about what's in their own area, and it's for people coming in.
Yeah, you see, I didn't realise that the two armies had come through the Gap of the North. I knew that William had come through it.
Yeah, but James had come through Dorset. He had come on the low road.
Yeah, right.
Do you know what I mean?
Yeah.
But they both came through South Armagh. They had to both come through South Armagh to get to the Boyne.
Yeah, again, it's an amazing story, and again, I would love to see the buses coming from Kerry up to here and coming from the Giant's Causeway and everywhere else here, because there's probably more history here, Una, than any other part of the island, you know, over that period of time. And it's I suppose it's mind-boggling trying to wrap all this around your head. And I think it's great that we're able to bring this story out to people here on Destination Newry, because I just think that it's a story that probably hasn't been told to a certain degree, and we're telling it now. And I'm thinking this is a great thing you're doing here. But I would love to see more tourists coming into this area.
But about 7 years ago, I had a phone call from Bagnall's Castle, from one of the girls in Bagnall's Castle, and she had a man there who was in Ireland for one day. He was a businessman who had come from Australia and had been doing work in England, and he came over on a one-day trip because his family history gave him the knowledge that his ancestor was one of the soldiers garrisoned in Myra Castle under Captain Smith. And she rang me to see, this man was standing there with her, and she rang me to see, did I know anything about what he was talking about? And there was somewhere to bring him. Now, I told my story last week, and I know that I'm one of the Rapparee people. But I could stand in Myra Castle with him so that he stood on the ground that his people stood on. And there's something about standing on the ground of your people. Now, the other thing is, I firmly and strongly believe that the only way that people feel threatened by anybody else's culture is if they're not confident in their own. If you know who you are and you know what your background is and you know where you are yourself, then somebody else's culture is no difference. You know, to be able to bring him there, for me, was the absolute pinnacle, that he could stand there 400 years and that we could say that we didn't allow it to be destroyed.
Yeah,
that it was still there.
Yeah, and what did he say? What did he think, when he was standing in that castle?
He couldn't believe. I mean, he didn't expect. He was looking snippets of story. He didn't expect that there was going to still be somewhere that he could stand. This is the thing, it's and in some ways, and I would love to see, as much tourism as we could have in this area. But I mean, part of what saved this area being destroyed by tourism is that it didn't happen at a time when there wasn't that people now are so aware of what they have here that they will protect it. That's the important thing.
I see Thomas McGuinness over in America, and he has been following this last 3 weeks, and he says he will now be, I will direct them to this region, must overlook it, and it should not be missed. So, Una, your reach from Mullaban, Carnally, the Rapparee, to Myra Castle, to America, and back again here. So it just shows you the stories that you're telling, they're resonating with people as we speak here and now across the world. So it'll be interesting to see. And here we come now to Bell's Castle, and we know what Bell's Castle looks like now.
Well, this is
the Castle of the Year.
Yeah, this is Bell's Castle. So for anyone that doesn't know what this is now, what is Killeavy Castle, and you can see that the structure of this building hasn't changed. Because it's a listed building, it couldn't change. But this was originally built by the Foxhall family. Now, the first grantee of land in this area didn't come through the plantation of Ulster. The first land that was granted and given away in this area is the story of Killeavy old churches, because it came at the dissolution of the monasteries. At the dissolution of the monasteries were closed and their land was given. It's why Bagnall got Newry. That was the dissolution of the monasteries in Newry. And Newry, as an area, was granted to Nicholas Bagnall, an English adventurer. But in the Killeavy area, the first man who got land was a man by the wonderful name of Sir Marmaduke Whitechurch. He also got the lands around Loch Bricklin at the dissolution of the monastery. So he became a wealthy landowner. But all of the subsequent landlords who came in to here, to the Bells area, it came through that lineage of Sir Marmaduke Whitechurch. So the first builders of this castle were actually the Foxhall family. But the last landlords who lived in it were the Bells. And John Bell would have fancied himself as an amateur archaeologist and excavated Ballymacdermot Court Cairn and wrote in the Newry Archaeology Journal about the work that he had done. Now, the last to live in it was Miss Bell, and it was in such bad repair that she actually lived outside in a mobile home because the castle itself was in very bad repair. So, I think for me, it's absolutely wonderful to see a local man come back and make this into Killeavy Castle, because and more so because it is a listed building. So I mean, eventually, if I had lived long enough doing tours, Bell's Castle would have fallen down, and I would come to a stage where I wouldn't actually be able to tell anybody or show them Bell's Castle. And Bell's Castle, the stone of Bell's Castle, some of it came from Clonrum Court Cairn. Clonrum Court Cairn is just directly across the road on the right hand. Bell's Castle is on the left hand side as you go over that road. Clonrum Court Cairn was on the right hand side in a field, and some of the stones of the old Court Cairn were used to build this. But it would have fallen down. So now you pass it. It's still the structure that was the castle, and it's there forever, which is
it's fantastically restored. It's a jewel in the crown of South Armagh. And of course, the man that built it, he went to Australia and made his fortune and come back, and he has a hotel in there now, and it is a fantastic, spectacular building here at the foot of Slieve Gullion. And again, I'd be saying to anybody, it's absolutely worth visiting. It's worth maybe even staying in, and it's just brilliant to see it. And again, I didn't know all the history of it, and again, you're telling me more, and it's brilliant. And again, the interaction we're getting from people here this evening is fantastic. So Una, keep going.
Right, where are we next, Cathal? Right, this is the old St. Luke's Church of Ireland in May, and I wanted to show you this, first of all, because you could drive through the village of May and probably not notice it. But this is where those landlord families are buried, the Foxhalls, the Seavers. Seavers were one of the landlord families. Seaver of the Bog. Seaver of the Bog was master of the workhouse in Newry in his time. The bells. So this is an important, just as you're passing through my, that you look at it. I think this one was actually bought by the council, and nothing was done with it then at the time that it was sold. And this is a problem. This became a problem for the Church of Ireland when their population had dwindled. What do you do with churches? You know, because if they're left, they go to rack and ruin, which this one has done. And that's why the one in Forkhill, the decision was taken at that stage that it would be sold and that they wouldn't actually allow it to fall down and become derelict as this one has. But just if you're going through May, and May means the plain, about the only flat place that there is in South Armagh, just have a look. All right, Cathal, I think the next one will take us to Killeavy. Yeah, and this will be our finishing, I'd say, for maybe for tonight, because there's Killeavy. This is Killeavy Old Church. Now, we looked at Orney and Orney Patrician Church, so Orney dating from the time of Patrick. This one also a very ancient one. This is the site of Menina or Blinia, the same name. And Menina had come here, it is said, from Fahard. She had left Bridget's convent at Fahard, and she had come here to Killeavy, to the solitude of the mountain. Killeavy, Killsleeve, the Church of the Mountain. She founded her monastery here in the late 5th century. She's reputedly baptized by Patrick. She's buried on the right-hand side of the graveyard, just to the right-hand side of these churches over alongside the wall. So that brings you to the story of Menina. Now, I'll follow on Menina when we go further up at the next slide, which will show us Menina as well. But just to stay at Killeavy, at the churches for a second. So, dating from the 5th century, but the two churches that you can see now, and I know if you're looking at it from here and you don't know Killeavy, you'd say that's one church. But there are two churches in it, the West Church and the East Church, as they would be known. The West Church is a pre-Norman church, the only pre-Norman church still standing in the county of Armagh. It's a 10th century church. The other church is a 15th century church. Now, as I say, these churches were taken over at the dissolution of the monasteries. But this is the barony of Orior. We talked about the barony and how we would do the land with the townlands, but you're in the barony of Orior. Now, the chieftains in the feus, we looked at them, were the O'Neills. The chieftains here in Orior were the O'Hanlons. The most famous, I suppose, Count Redmond O'Hanlon, the Rapparee, Tandragee Castle, the headquarters of Redmond O'Hanlon, and the old poem, on Douglas Bridge I met a man who lived adjacent to Strabane before the English hung him high for riding with O'Hanlon. So Count Redmond O'Hanlon would have been a very famous Rapparee, and Redmond O'Hanlon and stories of treachery, as we saw with Seamus Moore. But Redmond O'Hanlon actually killed outside Hilltown by one of his own clansmen, Art O'Hanlon. And Art O'Hanlon, in the story, in the ledgers of Dublin Castle, given £100 in the late 1600s for the head of Count Redmond O'Hanlon. So you're in O'Hanlon land when you're here. And the last abbess to leave Killeavy Church at the dissolution of the monastery was Alicia O'Hanlon, one of the O'Hanlon women. So Killeavy has a really, really long and ancient history. Now, I can take you around South Armagh, And there are numerous other people. And one of the things we will do one of the nights is to look at the different ambassadors that we have within South Armagh. But there was a lovely saying that the old people would have said, that every cock can crow in his own temple. So I can go right around South Armagh, but I have a special and passionate interest in that Cregan area, in the area that I grew up in, and the places that I know in it. And all of the ambassadors, we have a group of ambassadors in South Armagh, and each of them are specialised in different, either different geographic areas or different specialities. So I'm going to do a list of them some night and tell people how they contact all of them. But just because we're in Killeavy, the one that would have that interest in that Killeavy area is Anne Ward. And Anne Ward is very much involved in the whole story of Menina and the sacred sites of Menina. And the fact that this is a church area, the traditions that are part of Menina's Well are Christian traditions. The Holy Well and the whole story of people going to the Holy Well, just as Bridget's Well up in Fahar. But these are all coming directly through from the pagan Celts. The 4 quarter years of the old Celtic world are in Bollag, Baltana, Lunasa and Samhain. The 1st of February, the 1st of May, the 1st of August and the 1st of November. That's the old Celtic quarter year. The Celts were pagan people who worshipped wood and water. Hello?
Yes, keep going, Una. I can hear you.
Yeah, but I've got locked out of the thing somewhere.
Listen, don't worry about that. Okay, so we've lost Una for a second, but we'll get her back. But again, we have ambassadors for the whole area of South Armagh. I did know about them, but I don't know who they are. And of course, we look through the castles and the churches right across the whole of South Armagh. And I think, looking at what Una has been telling us here this evening, it is a phenomenal little bit of history. We've got a woman who threw the husband out of a window. We've got Lord Essex, who was the toy boy or playboy of Elizabeth I, and when he came into her when she had a baldy head, she didn't like it and she put him in the Tower of London, and probably what happened after that, he didn't see daylight again. And of course, all these little stories. And up into the Moira Castle, where Una took a guy from Australia whose forefathers was part of that garrison away back 400 years ago, and he stood where his people stood. And as Una said, her connections come back from the Rapparees, and we did hear about Redmond O'Hanlon, and I'm guaranteeing people had no idea that the castle in Tandragee was part of the Redmond O'Hanlon legacy. Of course, and then you have Redmond O'Hanlon's football club in Points Pass as you head towards Tandragee. So again, connections right across South Armagh by Una. She's been telling us this, and hopefully we might get her back before we go. With Kilnasaget inscribed stone, probably the oldest signpost in Ireland. Probably the oldest signpost in Ireland that a lot of people probably don't even know about. But it's here in our own area. The footsteps of South Armagh has been, I suppose, from the midst of time right through. I didn't get talking to you about the Queen Maeve and the Cooley Bull coming through South Armagh, but maybe when we get her back, we can talk about that, or maybe we could have another night about all that. So all I can tell you is that the stories that Una Walsh, the Rapparee, and she's very proud that her lineage goes back to Seamus Moore McMurphy, who was hung in Armagh. And I was in Armagh the other night, and I stopped at the stone, and I climbed up and I put my hand on the stone, believe it or not, where to commemorate the death of Seamus Moore McMurphy in 1750. And it just goes to show you the power of the show that DestinationNewry is doing here. And it's bringing this story right across the world. We have people in America enjoying this. We have people all around the country enjoying this. And I hope that when we finish, we will link all this together and we'll sign it to Ireland's Ancient East, and maybe they could signpost us into Ireland's Ancient East, because we have the oldest signpost in Ireland, and it didn't recognise borders, and that was the Kilnasaget stone. So I'm hoping that Una can come back in here, maybe a little technicality trying to get her back in before we finish. And I'm just waiting to see if I got a message here. No message through. So I'll just, let us know what you think of the history of South Armagh. We are getting great comments in here. I'm getting people stopping me in the street here. So there's Thomas again, and he says, I know it's difficult to copy, but I believe the National Library in Dublin has it for the people specifically interested in the Clevie area. The history of the Seaver family is a wealth of information. Yes, of course, and the Seavers, again, you have Seavers Road down there, and then, of course, there's another little Heath Hall over the back of where the Clevie football field is, and there's Ailish or Eileen O'Sullivan get Una into the schools. Well, Una is in the schools, and she is talking to them, and she had actually a virtual tour in the Slay youth club the other day for the kids as well, and she was telling them about what we're talking about here. So I think it's a wonderful thing. And when you get the opportunity to listen to a Shanachie who knows what she's talking about, or he, and Una has this the natural ability to tell the story and make it so as if you would nearly think you're standing in all them places that she's talking about as she speaks about them. And I think it's a great thing, and it's like everything else. If you're born a footballer, you're going to be a great footballer. If you're born a storyteller, well, Una Walsh, or Una Murphy as she was known, is one of those, and I can tell you she's one of the best. And I was up around Clevie Old Churches the other day. Funny enough, I would go up there quite regular and take a little walk through it and enjoy the serenity and the tranquility of the church in Clevie, the old Clevie churches. And of course, I think maybe the Vikings even maybe had a little forte up in there as well, and there was a little tunnel underneath to get out. So again, that's another one. We'll have a chat with Una when she comes back. But all I can say is it has been another absolute cracking show from the Shanachie, Una Walsh from she's originally from Silverbridge, Kernally, and of course she lives in Mullaband, and she is a wealth of information, and she is an ambassador for South Armagh. What an ambassador for South Armagh to be having in the likes of Una Walsh. It's great. And then of course she will tell us about all the other ones and how good it would be to be an ambassador for South Armagh. I think what we are doing here tonight and this last three Monday nights is we're telling the story of South Armagh, and we can't do it justice. But what we can do and what we have done is we have scratched the surface. And I think what we have done is we have got people's imagination looking at this. And I think what we'll also find from this is that there will be more people coming into this area, and it will be an absolute pleasure to see tourist buses driving through Camla, driving through Clevie, then down past Mike, heading over to staying in the Clevie Castle, or staying in Bell's Castle, whatever you want to call it, and then taking trips all around South Armagh. And what a wonderful thing it would be once we get rid of this pandemic and things come back to normal. But here this evening, we have to say it has been a pleasure for Una to be part of this. It looks as if we're not going to get her back here, and I don't want to be spoiling this by me talking, because I know a little bit. It was lovely to talk about Orkney Graveyard. I did visit Orkney Graveyard many times over the years, and my grandmother had children buried in it way back in the 30s, and probably because they were born, maybe they stillborn or something, and they weren't allowed to be buried in the Catholic Church or something like that. But they went and they were buried in Orkney Graveyard, and it's a lovely thing now when you hear this history of it, and you have Padre O'Donoghue Football Club in Forkhill, and they have their name spelt the way Una says it should be spelt, and of course they're named after the great poet. And it's brilliant that we have all this history, and it's all connected, and we're all connected to it, and nobody should be worried about where they come from or where they're going, because it's a little trip along the cosmos of the universe, and we're just a little bit of dust in the universe. But hey, that little bit of dust is absolutely land a smash here in South Armagh, and we're having a wonderful time. So listen, thanks to everybody for tuning in tonight, and we'll do this all again next Monday night at 7:30. So thanks again to everybody. Thanks to Cahill, and obviously the internet up around Mullaband must be bad tonight. Thanks to Una, and we'll do this all again next Monday night. So thanks for tuning in.